Hi, this is Edie Hovermale, host of Pacifica Currents. In this episode, we'll be discussing home birth. I have three great guests tonight. Renee Anker, licensed midwife. Welcome, Renee.
You.
Scott and Dena Cuyjet, home birth parents. Welcome, Scott and Dena.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about what is home birth?
Well, home birth includes prenatal care and, of course, the labor and birth and the postpartum care. It's the full care cycle for women. Sometimes a client will hire a doula to be present at the birth to help them through the whole process. For myself, I bring myself and an assistant who's usually another licensed midwife, because when the baby's born, we need a midwife for the mom and a midwife for the baby so that we don't have to divide our care up. Sometimes I bring along another assistant if I have an apprentice working with me who's fulfilling her clinical requirements to get licensed in California. So sometimes people look at that and think that's an awful lot of people, but from my standpoint, I can definitely keep one or two assistants busy.
What does a doula do?
Well, doulas provide non-medical support, labor support. What they generally do is help the woman with comfort measures to help her, say a woman is in labor and it's early labor, it's not yet time for the midwife to come, but she's having some trouble coping. Someone that is trained in the comfort measures of labor, she might be someone that provides some massage or some pressure, or someone that can help a woman with her breathing, all things designed so that the labor process can be made as easy as possible for the woman.
I had 3 home births, and my doula, we had a doula for 2 of those, and she was very indispensable, and it was really an emotional thing. So I'm glad you backed that up.
Yeah.
So let's go to the parents. What made you decide to have a home birth? What was your decision point?
I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner, so I work in the hospital, and when we had our first child, she was born with a midwife present, but in the hospital. And I hadn't really thought about home birth. I did want a very unmedicated birth, and I felt like most of my requests were filled at the hospital, but I wasn't as comfortable as I felt I could have been just being in my own home. And so her birth was very uncomplicated, and as soon as I knew I could do this within a reasonable amount of time, and I was able to leave the hospital within 6 to 10 hours after her birth, I think it set the seeds for the next child and wanting to do it just a little bit differently. I felt very empowered that I knew what to do and my body was willing to go along with that. And so second pregnancy, we decided to look into an alternative method to the hospital. We did look into some birth centers, and at the time there really wasn't anything like that in San Francisco. And so I knew of a few midwives, and we decided to just try home birth. So,
well, and also I'm a nurse practitioner, and so we had both just finished nursing school before our daughter was born. And having worked in the hospital and then given birth in the hospital, hospitals are really for more acute, critical things. Birth, for the most part, is natural. It's been happening for millennia. Mostly without problem, and we've medicalized it. And unfortunately, a lot of times negative things happen when you're in the hospital. So I didn't necessarily want to be in that environment. As Dena said, it wasn't as comfortable as being at home. You don't have, your bathroom, maybe you're sharing a bathroom. You can't necessarily just walk around through labor. They have certain liabilities that they have to meet, so they've got to monitor you every so often, and it's just not conducive to truly how women have been giving birth. So I wanted
He was very supportive.
So you were, that was my next question, you were very supportive, so you were,
oh yeah, definitely.
You were for it,
I was
very
definitely
for it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my husband wasn't necessarily all gung-ho, but once we started talking to a midwife, and then he came around. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how some experiences you've had with some of your clients and their husbands being supportive or needing some coaxing or family as well?
For the most part, just about every partner of a pregnant woman is concerned about the home birth. It's very normal, and a lot of times women have already done a lot of research. They're pregnant or before they got pregnant, and they kind of understand the range of their choices, and oftentimes their partner doesn't have all that information. So it's usually what I find is I will do an interview in the couple's home, and I will talk to them a bit about what happens and what type of equipment we bring and things like that. And I usually find that it's not a problem. Once the partner understands how things happen and of course what kind of emergency equipment I bring, then they generally relax and can see that it would be a great option.
So some of that, I would imagine, is it kind of explaining how birth, well, at least it happened with us, how birth happens.
Probably one of the first questions I get after sort of the safety concerns and wanting to understand a little bit more about it is, well, what happens if the baby comes so quickly and you're not there? And so people tend to view labor as something that might be sort of going along very quickly. And I think that if you think about any TV shows you've seen or movies, they usually over-dramatize birth, and the woman is just screaming and the baby's coming, and if there's an emergency, which TV loves to portray emergencies, it'll often be something that's happening very rapidly. But the truth is in labor that things, generally speaking, do not happen that quickly. Often if a baby is not tolerating labor very well or has something going on, it's something that's happening gradually. And the midwife's going to notice over time certain things happening with the baby's heart rate. Maybe it's not as reactive as it should be. And that will tell them to keep a closer eye. Maybe it just is something that can be resolved with maybe a baby's laying a bit on its cord and it needs just a position change. And generally speaking, we're trained to watch for certain signs, try to resolve them, and it gives us a chance to act and help resolve things. In California, we have licensed midwives and we have certified nurse midwives. Most people have heard of a certified nurse midwife by now. They usually work in hospitals, but in California there are nurse midwives that do home births, a smaller number to be sure, and also that have birth centers. Licensed midwives in our state pretty much work at home doing home births, and there are a smaller number that have birth centers as well. So a licensed midwife is a woman who has entered midwifery school directly without becoming a nurse first. But in other countries, midwives were seen as a distinct profession that was different than obstetrics. Women, of course, have always attended other women in childbirth, and it's been, a normal way that things were done for, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And, probably even up to a couple of hundred years ago, oftentimes the midwife was somebody that lived in the community, and she was someone that everyone knew, probably someone who had had her own children already herself, and who had come to being with women because they probably trained with the last midwife. And so it really was an apprenticeship model. It was on-the-job training, and it was somebody that was really respected and a person that someone looked up to because she had a lot of knowledge by the time she was attending births. And so it's sort of more of an organic process. And we know that a lot of this, throughout the world, this is true. And in fact, in some cultures that don't have quite as big of a medicine hasn't really become that big of a deal in their country yet, often still have this model that there's a community woman who helps people in childbirth. And this person usually had a lot of very good tricks up her sleeve for helping labor getting going, maybe if it was quieting down, or helping maybe move a baby into a more favorable position. And it was really only with the rise of medicine in the last 100 years in this country that we started to see those women more or less marginalized and kind of more of a medical model taking hold. But certainly that hasn't been the case for most of our history. And so that's how, you know, how midwives sort of lost a little bit of power around this, around birth.
I was wondering how Dena and Scott chose their midwife. I mean, it's a big decision.
Yes.
You're coming onto it, and what? So you said I know you looked at some.
Actually, I was in graduate school at the time when I had my daughter Summer, and she was 10 weeks or 8 weeks when I started graduate school. And when I got pregnant with my second one of my classmates was a midwifery student who had been a lay midwife previously, and was not doing home births any longer, but her best friend was doing home births. And so we were introduced to our midwife, Lucero Dorado, through my friend. And I thought we would go in and have an interview and then, you know, maybe meet the next person, and it wasn't that way at all. We fell in love and it felt right. Kind of going back to what you were saying, Renee, I was in my heart I had been in the hospitals for years, so I was looking for somebody who had a little bit more of the history. Our midwife was, her mom was a midwife, and her grandmother and her auntie, and she helped birth her mother's children, and it was just a community in Argentina of midwives. And I loved that. I was moved by that. Like I said, I knew hospital midwifery. A lot of my friends were midwives, but I was really moved by her story of just knowing birth inside and out from childhood and growing up with it. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody who knew birth that way instead of from a hospital model.
Yeah, and the impression that we got, some people choose to do things and some people are chosen to do things. And she just spiritually, you know, the feeling we got from her was that she was born to do this and just felt really safe with her. And your friend in her class had said that if she ever had another baby, this was the only person she would let, you know, do it for her.
We just really felt a neat connection with her.
Yeah, I had a similar one with my midwife, and I had actually interviewed a few, and she was the one I had the connection with. And I think, you know, everybody has connections with different people, so it was good for me to connect with several people, and I did look at a birthing center and so forth, but I just found a home birth midwife that I just loved. So I know there's advantages to home birth for many ways. One advantage is kind of the experience from the mom and dad. Right. So I can get that first, and then we'll talk about the advantages of safety, because there is some advantages, I think.
Being in the hospital, like I said, I mean, there are things that they have to do to make sure that you and the baby are safe, so that if they're not, you know, they don't have this huge liability issue. That causes stress, and when you're under stress, it's harder to manage pain. And so when we had, you know, the home birth, it was just so much more calm, you know, not having to go anywhere. So not having to go, okay, all right, what are your contractions now? Okay, now we should go into the hospital so that, you know, they can check you. But even the prenatal up until that point, I mean, you have the same person, but you don't know if they're the person who's going to be there at your birth. So there's some comfort knowing that, you know, this is the person that I'm seeing now that's going to be there. It's much easier to get a hold of them. You know, in the meantime, you're not going through, you know, different clerks and different people trying to get a hold of your provider because you had a question. You call them directly and they talk to you. Having just the smells, having your kitchen there, your own bathroom, it just creates a much more comfortable, safe environment. You can have as many people as you want. There's no rules about you can't have children, you know, or they can only stay for this period of time. These are visiting hours. I don't know, just.
And after my whole experience with it, something I didn't realize I would feel prior to having the home birth was, after the baby was born, I just wanted to sleep. You know, I just latched the baby on, wrapped myself and the baby up with a big blanket, and let me just sleep. And I felt, I didn't realize how in the hospital I was so much more
guarded.
Yeah, a bit guarded and had to, where's the baby? Where are you taking her? Why do you have to weigh her right now? What are you doing right now? And I just felt like I could really relax, and knowing that I was, our room was filled with my mom and my sister, and we had my best friend who was our doula and our midwife and her apprentice. And it just felt like this circle of women that was just so strong and so safe, and I could just lay back and just close my eyes and know that things were okay and I was safe. One funny thing that happened at our second home birth was a UPS guy who was a regular at our house came by and knocked on the door, and he wanted to chat it up and say, hey, today's my last day, just wanted to check in with everybody. And I was in transition and about to have a baby, and we were trying to kind of close the door on him, but I kept thinking in my head, you know, this is home birth, you know, the mailman's going to show up and it's okay. It just made me laugh and actually got me through that transition, and it was very comforting, to be honest with you, because it was just, this is part of being at home. So
the mailman comes when you're in
transition. And you have to understand, the picture would be that we have this kiddie pool in our living room. So not only was it a home birth, but we had a water birth. So we had this blow-up kiddie pool in our living room.
The hose coming in the door.
The hose coming through the door.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So he got to see the scene.
A little bit. Enough to say, oh, I think I'm going now.
That's good. How safe are home births?
Well, home births are very safe. I know that it can be hard for people to really believe that, because we tend to look at, you know, labor and delivery as a little bit of a scary moment, or things that, a time when things could potentially happen. But, you know, the truth is, for a healthy, low-risk woman who's having a normally progressing labor, home birth is actually just as safe as hospital birth. And this has been proven again and again by many, many studies over the years. And so, you know, it is very safe, and as long as you have someone there that, you know, is well trained, and they can just keep an eye out for you, make sure that everything's going well.
Dena, did you use some of that freedom to move around? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Definitely. I mean, I had labors that were around 6 hours, so they were fairly on the shorter end of, you know, what a labor would be. There was just no fear, and that's something I loved. I wasn't afraid of what was coming at me. Instead, I was kind of in control of what I was doing and where I wanted to be. I could say, I can't do this position, or I can't be in this, you know, be here right now. And I liked that a lot. I could walk around the house freely, snack, you know, just, I felt very, I was distractible, you know, easily, and not by beeping noises, but just by the telephone ringing, or just things that were comforting in my home. And so I felt like the labor, it made the labor less intense. Because I wasn't just watching something to tell me when the next contraction was coming, because I had a hospital birth, so I knew what that experience was like, when I was on a monitor and everybody rushing in when a contraction was happening. And, you know, I just wanted to feel it and let other people know, and they could sense from my face and my body language what was going on, instead of a machine going off. And I really, really liked that. That people would just knew when to kind of come in and move closer to me, and kind of when to move back to, and it was very comforting. So.
And one of the other things that happened, so I sort of alluded to this earlier, of not knowing whether the person that you saw was going to be at the birth. We had a midwife, and she came in and she said, you know, I may not be able to make it to your birth because I have this other woman, and, you know, it's taking a little bit longer than we thought. And so we're thinking, okay, well, she's not going to be here, so some stranger's going to come in and do this. And I mean, we were very forceful in saying that we needed to kind of be able to move around, that when you have a baby, ideally you want to be somewhat upright because you want gravity. You don't want to be laying on your back when you're having a baby. And what, not knowing if she was going to be there on time, and having, you know, a change of shift, so a nurse leaving and another nurse coming in, was at one point Dena's pain got really, really intense, and in retrospect she was going through transition, and at that point in time, you know, she wanted an unmedicated birth, and she was like, just give me an epidural or kill me. And you know, at that point, I wasn't going to, you know, argue and go back and say, but you wanted this. And I was just like, I'm not the one going through the pain. I will get you what you want. So, you know, we went out, we got this, we made it happen, had the epidural. Then they went and checked her. Oh, gosh, you're 10 centimeters, you're fully dilated, you're ready to have this baby. If somebody had been there to help talk her through that, you know, she wouldn't have needed that. And
I really just needed a slap in the face in the hospital. Just like the baby's head is there, but nobody looked. You know,
Right.
so.
And the other thing that's not dangerous about that, but that, I mean, home births are just as safe as hospital births, but sometimes things they do in the hospital can cause your problems. So giving somebody an epidural too early and they can't walk around and have that gravity help them in that movement of the pelvis, and they wind up becoming a failure to progress and they become a C-section. Whereas they wouldn't have if they had somebody who really could have worked through with them. But you have people and they just can't be there. They're doing multiple births at the same time.
I always tell people, because sometimes people are on the fence and they don't really know, you know, maybe I want to have a home birth, but maybe it's okay if I have it at the hospital as well. And really, you know, you can have a very nice birth in the hospital, but really it's about a little bit about control. In your own home, you get to say what happens. You don't have someone else imposing the rules on you. And the thing about the hospital, I tell people, is it's not a bad place.
No.
Sometimes people get up in this debate that if you like home birth, or for me, I'm providing home births, it means I don't like the hospital. But the hospital is an institution, and it can't offer a range of choices to every laboring woman. And it's just by nature of the fact of how it has to run that it kind of has to make a set of rules and everyone needs to follow them. And I think that's really, for me, the difference between home birth and a hospital birth is that at home you get all your choices provided, sort of laid out for you, and you get to decide what you want to have happen. And you know, that can't be true in the hospital. And so when you're directing what's happening to yourself, you're naturally more comfortable and you feel more comfortable. You don't have that adrenaline rush of having to go out to the hospital and have to acclimatize to a new environment. And we know that when adrenaline's released, it can slow down or stop a woman's labor, and then it has to kind of ramp up again. So there's a lot of things about place of birth that impact how someone gives birth that, you know, maybe people don't think of firsthand, but that can have a really strong effect on how their birth progresses.
Well, our show is almost up, but there was two things I wanted to make sure that we discussed. One is I wanted to have you talk about your practice and give some information on your practice, and thank you for coming in.
And you can just look me up on the web, easiest way. And I practice doing, my practice is a little bit different. I do home visits for my prenatal care. And so I come to someone's home and we spend about an hour to an hour and a quarter at each prenatal visit, and getting to know kind of what people want from their birth and how they see it unfolding. And then I am on call from 37 weeks to 42 weeks, depending on whenever a woman gives birth. And then I take care of women postpartum as well.
So we will have another show on postpartum. So that's why we didn't cover it too much here. And Dena and Scott, I wanted to make sure you brought this lovely letter from your mother.
Yes.
And I wanted to have you read some of that, because oftentimes when a woman or a couple decides to have home birth, sometimes it's hard to convince our families because they're worried about our safety. So I would love you to read that.
Well, and her mom's a nurse too, so she was like, oh no.
The story is entitled "The Greatest Miracle" by my mom, Janice. Finally, the call came. It's 1:30 a.m., August 5th, 1999. Hello, Mom, it's Dena. My water just broke and I've had a couple of light contractions. My mind and body immediately wake. Following a few short moments of deciding whether or not this is the real thing or just another false alarm, I assure Dena that she need not call back in an hour, that the birth is near. I throw 4 days worth of clothes in a bag. I'll be staying for a while. I wake Susie, her sister, and off we drive. This is the moment I've been waiting for.
I'm not sure which I feel the most, excitement or fear, for this will be a home birth in our home in Daly City, where Dena and Scott now live, where Dena was raised from the age of 4. I look over at Susie. She's fast asleep, exhausted from working nonstop. I take this opportunity to reminisce. Dena was my firstborn, born while my husband was away in Jordan. Alone, I timed my own contractions until I could no longer bear it. Friends took me to Boulder Community, and that was the happiest day of my life, the day my precious queen was born. Always trying her best, even if she came in second, she did so with an enthusiastic smile. She left all the worrying to me. That's what I did best. The day she told me she was having a home birth, I joked that I would alert Seton Hospital up the street and have an ambulance waiting outside just in case. She warned me that she would send me down to Judy's, the neighbors, for coffee if I acted up. That evening at Judy's house, I informed my coffee group about Dena's decision to have a home birth. They were aghast. It was the best acting performance of my life, pretending that this was the perfect way to go, and then waking up sobbing, worrying about the what-ifs. What if the pain was too much? What if the birth is too complicated? What if I lose control? What if something happens to the baby? What if the worst happens to my beloved Dena? I could never forgive myself. The 2-hour drive from Monterey is almost over, and I prepare myself as best as I can. We enter the living room. It is dark and peaceful. Dena and Scott are now in a large kiddie pool filled with warm water. Dena has reached the last stages of labor. 2 midwives are at her side and a friend is videotaping. Summer, her 3-year-old, comes in from the bedroom where she and her best friend and babysitter have been watching her favorite movies. Dena is leaning over the side of the pool, exhaustion showing in her eyes. The contractions are coming faster and faster. She changes position and leans against Scott. Summer, "You can do it. Breathe, Mommy, breathe," says her little daughter. The midwives remain calm. The warmth and power of the women chosen to be around the pool give Dena strength. The time for pushing arrives, and we witness the birth of the baby's head into the water, and then another push, and the baby is born and laid gently on Dena's tummy, content not to breathe for a minute or two. Dena has given her all. She looks as though she's been left both physically and emotionally drained. Is it a girl? No, it looks like a boy. No one cares to ask or lift the baby from his mom, with whom he's still connected, to check. The dawn has broken. A miracle has slipped into our lives. Dena, you did it your way. I give her our special thumb up finger sign, the same gesture we've used over the years, whether it be gymnastic meet or a swim competition, and Dena gives that famous smile.
Thank you, Dena. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Make sure you see us on YouTube. So good night.